So, almost 24 hours we have got without the Fever's new signing attacking Fever fans.
And a Fever just signed if you drew up a political activist and created one in a lab to have your team sign that could bring in and torch your locker room. I mean, literally come in, light it on fire, and burn the entire locker room down, and immediately raise the antennas of anybody in the fan base that's actually paying attention. And it makes you wonder, are we in a situation now with the Indiana Fever? Does their front office understand exactly what their new fan base is? And by new fan base, I mean...
What happens when a player you just signed becomes your worst nightmare in less than 24 hours? Imagine being part of an organization that just made what seemed like a brilliant move, signing a seasoned player who could bring the kind of experience and defensive prowess that would propel your team to the next level. That's exactly what the Indiana Fever thought they were doing when they announced Brianna Turner as their newest addition. At the time, it seemed like a smart move. Turner, known for her defensive skills and experience, could have been the perfect complement to Caitlin Clark, the Fever's undeniable star, who is already set to take the league by storm. They had big plans, and fans were buzzing with excitement, eager for a team that seemed on the brink of greatness. But instead of excitement, things quickly took a turn for the worse. In less than 24 hours, this seemingly promising signing turned into a nightmare that sent shockwaves throughout the Fever fanbase, the locker room, and the entire WNBA community. What went wrong so quickly? How did one tweet from Turner turn a high-profile signing into a full-blown PR disaster? Let's break down the chain of events that unraveled one of the most shocking controversies the Fever and the WNBA has seen in years. The Indiana Fever were coming off a season of promise. They had made the move that could change their franchise's trajectory forever. They secured Caitlin Clark, one of the most dominant and talked-about players in college basketball history. Her meteoric rise to stardom wasn't just a fluke. It was the product of years of tireless work, setting records, and reshaping how people viewed women's basketball. When she was drafted into the WNBA, the buzz was palpable. Fans across the league were eager to see what she would do on the biggest stage. The Fever, recognizing the immense potential that Clark brought, knew they had to surround her with the right supporting cast. Enter Brianna Turner, a veteran player with significant experience and a reputation as a top-tier defender. It made sense. Turner could add some much-needed defensive stability, especially with the high-flying, fast-paced nature of the Fever's offense. Adding Turner to a roster already boasting Caitlin Clark, along with some other strong players, seemed like a winning combination. The Fever were building a solid foundation for a team that could make deep playoff runs and, potentially, compete for a championship. Fans were ecstatic, hopeful that the team was on the brink of something big. But in the blink of an eye, everything changed. Turner's signing, rather than adding to the team's momentum, ended up being the catalyst for one of the most unexpected and ugly public relations disasters the franchise had ever experienced. But what could have gone wrong so quickly? The answer lies in a tweet that set social media ablaze and created a rift between Turner, the Fever fanbase, and even her teammates. It all started innocently enough, or so it seemed. Brianna Turner, not even a full day into her new position with the Indiana Fever, made a tweet that seemed to question the celebration of Iowa's NCAA runner-up team. The tweet read, "Iowa will hold a celebration to honor the NCAA runner-up. All players and coaches expected respectfully. I'm confused. Is this what a runner-up typically does?" At face value, it appeared to be a harmless comment, maybe even a bit rhetorical, about Iowa's decision to honor a team that had fallen short of the ultimate goal. But to those paying attention, this was far from an innocent question. It was a shot fired directly at Caitlin Clark and her team.
Why?
Because this tweet was posted shortly after Clark's Iowa team had finished as NCAA runners-up. Clark, as the star of the team, had carried Iowa through a season of record-breaking performances, cementing her place as one of the most recognizable names in women's basketball. Iowa's runner-up celebration was a tribute to their incredible season, and it was in this context that Turner's tweet seemed more than just a random opinion. It looked like a veiled attack at Clark's success and her devoted supporters. But this was just the beginning. Fans didn't let the comments slide. They were quick to dig through Turner's past tweets and social media activity, hoping to uncover more about her stance on the matter. And what they found wasn't a one-time misstep. It was a pattern. Over the years, Turner had made other comments that appeared to undermine Clark and her supporters. These weren't isolated incidents. They painted a picture of someone who, despite being a part of the Fever organization, didn't seem to support the very player they were building their future around. What started as a simple tweet soon exploded into a full-blown controversy that the Fever couldn't ignore. The fallout was immediate and intense. Fever fans, who had been so excited about Turner's arrival just hours before, now found themselves reeling. Social media erupted with fury. How could the Fever sign someone who openly mocked their franchise player before even stepping onto the court? How could they bring someone in who seemed more interested in taking shots at the team's biggest star than supporting her? The backlash wasn't just from a few fans, it was widespread. The Fever's own fanbase felt betrayed. Caitlin Clark had become the face of the franchise, and now they were watching a member of the team disrespect her in front of the entire league. Fans voiced their outrage through thousands of tweets, demanding that Turner be cut from the team. They felt their loyalty to the Fever and Clark had been betrayed. As the storm raged on, Turner didn't seem to understand the gravity of the situation. Instead of apologizing or clarifying her comment, she chose to respond with defiance. In a tweet, Turner told the angry fans, "Feel free to unfollow me or block me if that is bothersome to you." This response was nothing short of tone deaf. Rather than attempting to repair the damage or engage in a constructive dialogue, Turner doubled down, sending a message to her fans that she wasn't concerned about their opinions. She made it clear that she wasn't interested in winning them over or addressing their concerns. This only served to make the situation worse. What could have been an opportunity for Turner to apologize, clear the air, and begin rebuilding trust turned into a PR disaster. The Fever front office, caught in the middle of this rapidly escalating situation, knew they were now facing a public relations nightmare. The team had not only alienated their most loyal supporters, but also put their new franchise player, Caitlin Clark, in an uncomfortable position. Fans were demanding answers, and the Fever had no choice but to act quickly before the situation spiraled further out of control. To understand the full weight of Brianna Turner's tweet, it's important to step back and look at the broader context. Caitlin Clark was more than just another player in the WNBA. She was, by all accounts, the face of a new era in women's basketball. Her performances had drawn in a new wave of fans, many of whom had never followed women's sports before. Clark's rise had been meteoric, and the attention she was receiving was unprecedented. With her ability to sell out arenas, break records, and draw higher TV ratings, Clark had single-handedly pushed the WNBA into the spotlight in ways no player had before. But with that success came jealousy. Not everyone in the WNBA was thrilled by the rise of Clark. Some players felt threatened by the new level of attention she was receiving, and Turner's tweet was just one example of this growing resentment. Players like Angel Reese and Chine Carter had openly clashed with Clark on the court, taking jabs at her on social media and in interviews. Turner, too, seemed to feel uncomfortable with the spotlight that Clark brought to the game. Rather than embracing Clark's rise and recognizing the opportunity it presented for the league as a whole, Turner appeared to push back against it. What Turner failed to recognize was that Caitlin Clark wasn't just another player. She represented the future of women's basketball. Her success wasn't just good for Iowa or the Fever, it was good for the entire league. By questioning Clark's success, Turner was essentially rejecting the very thing that could elevate the WNBA to new heights. And the worst part? This wasn't the first time something like this had happened. The league had already witnessed other players, perhaps even more prominent ones, make similar attempts to undercut Clark's success. But Turner's actions were the straw that broke the camel's back. This wasn't just about one tweet anymore. It was about a growing divide within the WNBA, one that could threaten the future of the league itself. Now, the Fever found themselves at a crossroads. They had signed Brianna Turner to be an essential part of their defense, a solid, veteran presence who could help guide the Fever toward their championship aspirations. But in the span of a single day, Turner had turned into a lightning rod for controversy, dividing the fan base and creating a rift within the locker room. The Fever front office was in a tough spot. Do they stick with Turner, hoping the storm would pass? Or do they cut ties with her to protect their team's unity, the fan base, and most importantly, the culture they were trying to build around Caitlin Clark? At this point, keeping Turner on the roster was becoming more trouble than it was worth. Turner had already managed to alienate a large portion of the Fever's fan base, and her actions had made her a liability. The Fever's primary goal had always been to build around Clark, the team's franchise player. Clark was the key to the Fever's future success, and it was clear that any disruption to her environment could have far-reaching consequences. Keeping Turner, who had publicly disrespected Clark, was no longer an option. The Fever had to act quickly to salvage their team's culture and protect the integrity of the locker room. The Fever front office had made a critical error by remaining silent for as long as they did. They had hoped that the situation would die down, that fans would forget, and that Turner could quietly continue her career in Indiana. But that wasn't the case. The longer they waited, the more intense the backlash became. What could have been a small controversy quickly escalated into a full-scale PR nightmare. Fans weren't just angry, they were deeply upset and felt betrayed by the very organization they had supported for so long. The real danger, however, wasn't just the external pressure from the fans. It was the internal tension that was building inside the locker room. Caitlin Clark, who had worked so hard to earn her place in the WNBA and become the face of the league, was now forced to deal with a teammate who had publicly mocked her success. The situation had become incredibly awkward. How could Clark focus on basketball when her own teammates seemed to resent her? How could she build chemistry with someone who had already made her feel like an outsider in her own team? The Fever coaching staff had worked tirelessly to foster a positive and supportive environment in the locker room. But now, they were faced with the fallout from Turner's actions. Tension was brewing, and if they didn't act fast, the locker room's focus would be lost. And that would only undermine the Fever's chances of building a championship-caliber team. As Brianna Turner dug in her heels and refused to apologize, the situation became untenable. Fans were not only furious, they felt disrespected. Turner's tweet was one thing, but her refusal to take responsibility for it was another. It showed a lack of accountability and a complete disregard for the very fans who had supported her. At this point, the Fever had no choice but to sever ties with Turner. She wasn't the player they had hoped for. She wasn't the leader they needed. And more importantly, she wasn't someone who would help them achieve their ultimate goal, winning a championship. With the controversy behind them, the Fever now had to look forward. They had learned a valuable lesson about team culture, public relations, and the importance of respecting their fan base. And with Caitlin Clark still at the center of their plans, the Fever had a bright future ahead of them if they made the right decisions moving forward. The WNBA itself had a choice: embrace the new era of women's basketball that players like Caitlin Clark were ushering in, or risk being left behind by resentment and division. The time to move forward had come, and the Fever had to focus on what truly mattered, building a championship team that would bring glory to Indiana and the WNBA.